So what we're going to talk about today is the origins of Nexus and the processes that you went through in designing the game. Because obviously it didn't end up, or it didn't start like this. There was many steps. So, and that's what I'm very curious about. I want you to kind of walk me through from the beginning. I know you've already told me about you guys going out to lunch, having this great idea, and you started coming up with rules, and you decided you needed pieces. And tell me about what happened. Where'd you start?
I think the first thing we did is get a 3D printer.
Yeah, I got a 3D printer before we even started writing rules because I knew we'd need one, and I'd always wanted one.
Sure. You were already doing a bunch of 3D work, so it
Yeah.
just made sense that you'd want a 3D printer.
Yeah.
This was like the perfect, excuse.
It was the perfect excuse to get a 3D printer. I'd been doing 3D stuff since I was 15. That instead of getting a car, I had money saved to buy a car, and instead of getting a car when I turned 16, I bought a Amiga.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because it had, I think it was called Calligra 3D. I think that was the name of the program. I don't even remember, but it was like a 3D modeling program for my Amiga, and I think the thing was like, it was like $2,000 for the computer and the program, like the whole setup, and it was super cool. I could start rendering something before I went to school in the morning, and this is at like 680 by 420, resolution, and not that day when I came back from school, but the next day when I came back from school, I would have the 3D rendering of my model. It was incredible.
I remember it because we'd talk about it at lunch at school, like, oh, it's still rendering.
Yeah.
It should be ready, tomorrow when we get home.
Yeah. And but that's how far back I go with 3D, and I'd always wanted a 3D printer. So when we had this idea, it was like, well, we're gonna need a 3D printer, so let's order one and get it. The base concept of the rules, I think that was a weekend, like our initial kind of groundwork of the rules, and that was this. I actually dug this up. So this was the official first
version 1.1
version 1.1 of the rule book. And we had the action rounds. We had the action rounds in
bigger
here.
Board, sort of. Yeah, let's talk about the board.
Okay. So this was our first iteration of the Nexus game board.
12 by 12 squares.
12 by 12 squares. So we thought for sure you're going to need a lot of room to move around and do things. Because early on, before we were hardcore playtesting this stuff, we just had the concept in our mind of what gameplay might be like, and that was a really important distinction when it came to making the game. What we thought in our head when we were playing out the fantasy and all the role play, and what the actuality of things were going to be. We had this board. We 3D printed our helots, which I think our original concept was they were gonna have interchangeable parts.
Interchangeable parts, but I think we were actually considering doing them like this, where they were just a generic figure. Like they didn't have faces. Like they literally were just like appendages.
Yeah, and you were gonna be able to take the arms off,
like abstract almost.
Pop them in place, so when you lost a limb, you'd pop the limb off of the model. We had this big, huge board. These were our columns, our original columns for it. Here you go. You good, Jay?
Thanks, man.
We had a bunch because the board was
big.
So
a lot of real estate to move around.
Yeah, in the original iteration, it was like a labyrinth.
Yeah.
And as we played the game, as we actually played it and play tested it, we realized, we're fighting each other. There's no reason to have this much distance.
Yeah. A lot of the game was just wasted on movement that wasn't necessary for the most part.
So instead of doing a 12 by 12 grid, we did an 8 by 8 grid. So the 3D printer that I got could not print very big areas. This was about the maximum size of the print area for the 3D printer. So we had to build our board in sections, kind of put it together. So this is what was happening is when we were playing on this, we'd bump the table and the pieces would slide.
Yeah, and it was annoying because like positioning is so important in the game. Even your forward-facing direction is important. So
there's extra pieces. 'Cause
okay.
when we originally did this, it was still 12 by 12, the first iteration that we did.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so then, there we go. So this was our original game board, similar to what the final version looked like. This took a long time to print.
It wasn't like rendering stuff on the Amiga though.
No, it didn't take that long, for sure. This would be our board, and then we'd set up our guys. When we bumped the table, everything was good. Now we had way too many columns, so we got rid of columns. We changed it to 4. And our rule book started getting bigger. We started adding in the artwork. We started getting pieces from Mike and Danny. We started fleshing stuff out. The motivations started getting refined.
Mm-hmm.
We included the hazards, which these were the braziers, the original,
The
first edition braziers.
The alpha.
Yeah, the floor saws, the floor spikes, the dart columns.
Yeah. Those sure grew up.
Yeah. And this is what we would play on. Then we had our turning point counter.
Oh yeah, I love this. The turning point counter was a big thing. We called this the clackers.
Yeah, our turning point clackers.
And this was actually 3D printed and then
I assembled
engineered
Yeah.
mechanically.
And we set it up so the person that you were playing could see what numbers you had up and down.
Yeah, they're two-sided, so.
The reason that it originally was this size is because this is a standard miniature size. We wanted to, just use the standard size, and this is kind of the scale that everything came out at. And we didn't like playing it like this.
Yeah.
Because everything's just so dainty and
fiddly.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right.
It didn't feel right at all. What we did is we decided, okay, we're going to change the base size of our guys, and they're going to be a 50 millimeter base. This became that. And it just felt better. It was a lot more substantial. Yeah. That led us to, how are we going to make a board? We wanted to keep this, where everything kind of sat snugly in it, but it wasn't feasible. As, like even looking at 3D printing it or whatever, like having the little grooves dug out into the board, it just didn't, I don't know, it wasn't going to work. So what we could do is we could print 3D bases for our models and make custom 3D bases. And then we kind of went to this, which is the state of the board now. Now, what this is a solid plastic board. And the grooves are reversed. Instead of coming out, like instead of grooving out the inside part, we grooved the outside part. We made our custom bases so they fit around that square. And in doing that, this was a lot easier to make, because instead of having to cut all the center out, all we had to do was just cut the
straight
lines on the board. So that made this feasible. And with this and our new size, it was just a lot more satisfying to play. As we later discovered, we made a chessboard.
Yeah.
It's an 8x8 grid.
By accident.
By accident. And
That's where our innovation got us.
Yeah.
We invented a chessboard.
But that being said, it's cool because most chessboards you get are 50mm squares.
Mm-hmm.
So
again, that was just it was weird coincidence how all that worked out.
Yeah. But, you know, over time, apparently we learned what everybody else learned. When you play chess, you don't want to do it like this. You want to do it like this. So we give you the
And
Nexus.
apparently there is a perfect size to play it.
Yeah. Yep. Which we came by honestly.
Yeah.
This is probably one of my favorite things. This right here, this is the original creature pit. So it was a hand coming up out because
it reminds me of the original Zelda. You go to the dungeon, the hands that come through the walls at you.
Yep. So this was the original creature pit, and this is what it has evolved to over time.
It's got more personality now.
Just a little bit. It's a little more threatening. But yeah, the 3D printing was amazing. At the time, I was blown away that you could just take a 3D model and make it a physical, tangible thing. That was until I saw the hand sculpted.
Did you go straight from these 3D printed models to the sculpts, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That was the jump.
Yeah.
So how did you find out? Like, how did you figure out how to do that? I mean, I know did you just research things online?
First, it took a lot of phone calls and leaving voicemails that weren't returned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't have any information. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anybody that did anything like this. We've never worked in the industry. We were green as green could be.
Oh yeah.
So it started out doing probably what everybody does. I was looking on forums and stuff, and I looked into 3D fairly quickly. That was the first thing I did. Is I was like, well, 3D, yeah. Let me get 3D sculptors, and we can get stuff printed out. And I found companies where I could send them the concept art, and they'd make 3D models. And as we went down that road, I was looking at all of it, and while the 3D stuff was really cool, when I saw the hand sculpted stuff, it wasn't as cool.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much instantly decided, forget it.
Yeah.
We're not doing 3D printed.
Right. And I mean,
or 3D rendered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been way cheaper. It's way cheaper to do 3D. You can do infinite changes with the 3D model. You can render it and make it look like it exists, even though it doesn't, which is like 99% of every Kickstarter you see. That was a decision that we made early on, that we knew the ramifications of the decision. Like, we knew that it was going to be harder having hand sculpted miniatures when it comes to marketing the game, because instead of just hitting a button and have it rendered and have the lighting and everything all perfect on it, we were actually going to have to get them sculpted, then get them cast and made in resin, to have them assembled and painted, and make sure that they were done right to be shown in their best light. Then we were going to have to photograph them,
physical
like
specimens.
Photograph actual physical, miniatures, and then we were going to have to incorporate that into, our advertising materials and our Kickstarter page, which even that step is a pain, because when you render something in 3D, I can render it without a background.
Mm-hmm.
I can just render it already completely cut out perfectly and seamlessly, and then I've just got a bunch of...
Pop anything behind it.
Yeah, I can pop anything I want behind it. And
change the lighting at any time.
If I don't like the angle of it, I can just go into my 3D program and just rotate it a little bit to make it perfect. So, at every step of the way, it was harder to market hand-sculpted miniatures. It's way easier to work with 3D. It's way cheaper to pay 3D artists, because in comparison to hand-sculpted miniatures, they're a dime a dozen. It would have been way more cost-effective to do 3D.
Sure.
But final product of what we have here, I'm so glad we made the decision to do the hand-sculpted miniatures. They're amazing. And there's things that when you're actually physically holding the miniature and it exists in real space while you're designing it, the final product is so nice. It's so nice.
Why did you go with this plastic cardboard? I mean, you kind of touched on that a little bit, but versus a cardboard or something like that, that would be, much more cost effective.
Because we're grown men.
Because everything's the same. Like, I don't know. We just wanted something different,
I don't want my game to look like my kids' Chutes and Ladders. We're making it for adults. And, for me, if it's something that I'm going to play a lot and often, and I want to have, like, my friends over to play a game, I want something that looks good on the table. I want something that is weighty. Like a nice chess set.
We also had that kind of initial concept too, where we wanted to make this where you needed like the fewest components possible to actually play it, and that way we kind of grow almost like a homebrew type game that people could use existing stuff that they had laying around their house. And that was a vision, at one point where everything was a la carte, and you could just use a chessboard you have laying at your house and then upgrade to this later.
Because initially we were really trying to make this affordable to anyone at any budget.
And we didn't want to have all these kind of exclusive components to it that were kind of hard to track down. So that's why we kept it with polyhedral dice, just the traditional, and didn't have custom dice for it. By making it pen and paper, it's like, okay, you just need to print a sheet. You don't need a special, player mat made of cardboard. And
you can play the game with a chessboard and really with chess pieces. Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of play testing with chess pieces, where we would just, break out a chessboard and do that, just to see if it worked, just to see if that was feasible. And it is. I mean, it still is. Where we calmed down was we were going to have everything resin. We scaled it back to making plastic available for people. I talked about cardboard at one point, and
physically ill.
Yeah, Jay did not like that idea. I really didn't like the idea either, but I was desperate to make it accessible to everybody that wanted to play it. And I don't know, that's probably been the hardest part in the whole process.
Compromises.
Yeah. Is like, do we want to make this, accessible to where somebody could pick it up for like $100?
It wouldn't be the game.
Yeah.
It's not the game. It's not the game that we want people to play.
Yeah. Or it would be a lot of cardboard and, really not very good quality. I mean, you can get a box full of miniatures for cheap, but that's what you're going to get. And we didn't want to do that.
Tell me about the Turning Point counter, the way it started, and then kind of run me through where it is now.
We didn't want to make things expensive just for the sake of making them expensive. And this is a very expensive thing. While we liked it, we really sat down and thought about, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is there another way to do it? Because we love the mechanic. We love both people being able to see what's going on. We love things that are tactile. There's a lot
of the physicality of it.
But what we ended up doing is we ended up designing this frame. When we decided to put the frame around the game, did a lot of different things. We want the logo facing the camera. Of course. But normally this would be rotated. Yeah. So Jay's numbers would be here, and then my numbers would be along the side over here. And we already knew that we were going to have coins to keep track of your cred during the fight. The version that we designed, the RPG play, you keep track of your fighter's cred. As he does things during the fight, he earns more cred, which then translates to rep at the end of the fight. So we already had the coins, and we knew that we wanted a way to kind of store and count the coins that would be easy. We had little
pegs.
We had little peg things that you would stick in for your turning points. You would have 6 pegs sitting over to the side while you were playing, and you'd put them in to count your turning point. I think we were playtesting one day and we didn't have the pegs.
Yeah, or we didn't have enough of them or something.
Yeah, there was
Like,
some reason.
Yeah.
And Jay was like, well, let's just take a coin and put it in there.
And they fit like perfect.
And they fit perfectly in like the way that they, I don't know.
Lay, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, why don't we do that all the time? Like, why are we making pegs? We're already spending, money having coins made.
So it was at that point where like we wanted to make it where a lot of things had dual purpose in the design of it. They pulled double duty, and that's how the turning point counter and the grid system got combined essentially. And then we had this free space here.
Yeah, which we weren't
had
sure
nothing
what to do
on
with it.
there.
So we decided to just make it so it would hold the cards while you were playing for stuff that comes up. That way you knew what was going on. That normally this board would be rotated, they wouldn't be sitting right in front of Jay like that. And then, as we started getting our sculpts in, now all of a sudden we're play testing with like the actual miniatures that are going to come with the game, and everything's starting to look more substantial, like a real game. Like this is when everything started just really
Together.
clicking.
Yeah.
As I learned, we were going to have to make a mold for the frame. So to make a mold, to make a real good quality mold, you needed to work in step files instead of STL files. So it's kind of like, if you're into graphics at all, it's basically like the difference between a vector and a bitmapped image. Vector is just tighter at any resolution, it's more exact, it's more precise, it's based on mathematical equations, and your bitmap images are basically pixels and little squares. Long story short, I needed to learn CAD. I needed to learn how to design things in CAD, which I had never done before. I had always just worked in 3D Studio Max. So once I called enough people to find out, I was like, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, and they were like, well, this is what you're going to need to send somebody, and you're not going to have it 3D printed, you're going to need to have it CNC machined. I was like, okay, well, this was on a Friday, and we wanted stuff quick. So that weekend I learned CAD, and I redesigned the whole thing in CAD. But when we finally got this back, I mean,
yeah, we were so happy.
We're so happy. Between this and the board, it was perfect. Like, it looked like what we wanted it to look like. Everything had the right kind of feel to it.
Weight to it.
It was really functional, like playing the game. It wasn't a bunch of scattered stuff. Like, everything was pretty much confined.
Yeah, pretty concise.
To this space. You need your pen and paper, for your character sheets, but other than that, everything's right there in front of you. Everything's got its spot. We were really, really happy. This is when it started to really take shape. So originally when we played, we had different miniatures for Prone. So we had, our Hellet standing up, and then we had this kind of on his knee trying to get back up. And we would swap them out on the board while we were playing.
Yeah, and that was fine when we just had the generic guy.
We don't want to make two sculpts of every single motivations just to have one, sitting down. We were so used to swapping them out. We were so used to this that we made it a lot more complicated than it needed to be for a while. In the first design of the board, we have this prone hole, and we were going to make prone indicators that were there when you were prone. And we did that for a long time.
Yeah.
A really long time.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when we went to Gamma, I think we were still intending to do it this way.
And we used to talk about it all the time. Like,
yeah.
It was like one of those things that
we
was
were
so
unhappy.
elusive. Yeah, we're always unhappy.
We did not like
Like,
this.
we even talked about putting flags in here.
Yeah. We could not wrap our head around it. And then at some point, Jay had this like eureka moment. Oh, we're getting cards made. Why don't we just have a card that has erect on one side and then prone on the other, and while you're playing, they could just be sitting in front of you.
When I came up with that idea too, we were talking about how much fun it is to watch people play Nexus. It'd be great if everybody watching it could see, just from glancing at it, that, hey, that character is prone.
And it gave us a chance to put the word erect
in
our game, which, we're dumb and we like that kind of stuff.
And to have artwork right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any chance to put the artwork on something else is awesome. We've got the cards, we got the frame, we got the board, we got the minis, we got the coins. You know, we were starting to feel really, really good about the table presence of it. Then at this point, our book was kind of looking like this. We started getting some color pieces kind of thrown in here. We were getting a lot more artwork. But in the back of our heads, we kept thinking, well, maybe we could have somebody at some point.
Well, we're big into RPG books, and RPG books just look gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, every page is just like amazing and
Mm-hmm.
really kind of draws the whole theme of the game together. That book kept on meeting the bar of the RPG.
We were gonna look for a graphic designer, and it was something that was just kind of on the back burner. Like, we know we're gonna do this. We got to do this at some point, just to try and get somebody to see our vision for what we wanted to do. We're a big fan of black and white art. Like fantasy, you can it's a little easier to get away with black and white art but sci-fi and black and white is such a weird combination.
Yeah.
And we made it work in our book, but selling that to another graphic designer it was going to take time. Like it was going to be a long process, and it's something that we honestly thought that we were going to wait until after the Kickstarter to do. You know, once we got everything kickstarted and we knew what our budget was going to be for it. Jay moves. He gets into his new house. He starts meeting his neighbors. One of his neighbors is like, "Hey, I'm a graphic designer," and I'm like, "Yeah." You know, I've met a lot of graphic
There's
designers.
a lot of graphic designers.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of people that own Photoshop. At this point, I had done all the graphic design for everything in the project, the website, the ads, the book, everything. I didn't know this person from Adam, but I was open to it. If you want to give it a shot,
No.
I had no faith. I was like, this is just going to be a waste of everybody's time, but whatever. He came to us with his first kind of draft, and it was completely wrong, but it was great quality.
Yeah, it was really good.
It was really good. Like, he was really a graphic designer, and we got really excited because it was like, okay, how do we tell him we don't like anything he did, but we love him?
His work. Yeah,
yeah, we
his
love
work
your
is
work.
great.
Yeah.
It's just not great for this project.
Right, because it looked like a fantasy book. It looked like
It sure
a D&D
did.
book, and which is great. But that's not what we wanted. We had a really weird kind of vision, and we were really worried about, like, can we get this vision out of our brain and into somebody's head and actually get it
I mean,
on
we
a
were a little
page.
worried, too, like, if it was even possible to meld all this stuff together
Yeah.
and have it look right.
And then he came back with his designs based on our input, and we were just floored because it was exactly more than what we pictured. Like, there were things that he just intuitively knew as a designer that needed to be done that weren't even on our radar, and it just took everything to a whole new level as far as the design. And then that's where we're at with our current state of the rules now, which this book keeps getting thicker and thicker as we get more artwork and get things laid out properly. But I mean, as you can see, it's got flavor to it. There's no way the camera's picking this up.
Yeah, but there's so many little details.
Just little
On
details.
every page.
And this isn't even a final design by any means. This is just this was a week of like
long days.
I think that the night before we were getting ready to send this to the printer so we could have it in time to take it to Origins, I sat at Josh's house with him until like 4 a.m. just for like emotional support. Like, I wasn't really doing anything other than just hanging out with him and answering whatever questions he may have about stuff.
Eating his food.
I ate a lot of his pistachios.
Yeah.
And those things are expensive. But but yeah, I mean, he did such a phenomenal job of bringing our vision. And if you look, like, there's not a design. It's not like there's just this one design that goes through the book. There's 3 or 4 completely different book designs within this thing, because the vision that we had for it is that the manual is almost like somebody,
Scrapbook, almost.
yeah, like somebody
journal.
snuck it out of the NEXUS. Alanista snuck it out of the NEXUS and sent it out to tell other people about it, like, you know, come here and this is where you can make your fame and fortune. And each part of it is stuff he assembled from different sources within the NEXUS. So part of the book is written by one faction and another part of the book's written by another faction, and each section has its own style to it based on the people that were writing it.
The source.
The source. And the writing has a different tone and, you know, all of it. And it was like, we wanted it to be really, really immersive to go with everything else in the game, because at every point we wanted everything that you touch when you're playing NEXUS to be the same quality of the miniatures. We didn't want it to just be like, oh, here's a pretty little box of miniatures and then no substance.
And here's a pamphlet of how to play.
Yeah, here's a pamphlet on how to play. You know, we wanted it to be immersive and engaging, and we want you to feel that we don't want anybody to have buyer's remorse.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to feel like, wow, I can't believe everything I'm getting. Like, this is expensive. We're not going to try and hide from the fact that our game is expensive, but when you get it, you will feel where the money went into the game. Like, it's not going to disappoint on any level. Gameplay, miniatures, the visuals, just the footprint of the game, the book, the lore, the graphic design, just everything just builds on everything else.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, everything drives the theme.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you touch is going to drive the theme of what you're doing. And I don't know, I'm glad you moved.
Yeah.
I'm really glad we found Josh. That was something that
the book really does tie everything together.
Yeah.
It makes everything else just work even that much better.
Mm-hmm.